So I'd like to present to you the trick that apparently fooled Albert Einstein. So it just involves a spectator cutting off a small amount of cards. So in this case, I can't really ask you to count them because they're not here. So I'll just spread them out so then you can count them for yourselves. And while you're doing that, I'll also be cutting off a small amount for myself as well. Okay? So once you're done counting, I'll just collect everything. And now I know exactly the final number that you're going to end up with. Because hear me out, I know for a fact that I cut the same amount of cards that you have, but I cut 3 extra, and the leftovers from my packet are going to be enough to make your packet 10 cards. So I know that you're going to end up with 10 cards. All right, so let's just count them out to verify. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. But you remember when I said I had 3 extra? So 1, 2, 3. And then we have 2. So 8, 9, and then 10. So my prediction did come true. You did end up with a final number of 10 cards. And that's the trick that apparently fooled Albert Einstein, which we'll go into right now. If you've ever tried searching for magic tutorials on YouTube, chances are you've probably seen or heard of something called the trick that fooled Albert Einstein. It's just an easy way to clickbait people, but it's also the name of an actual plot in magic. So we're going to go over the trick that fooled Einstein today. We'll go over a method for the plot, as well as discuss whether or not this trick actually fooled Albert Einstein or it was all just a myth. Okay, so I admit I didn't really piece together much of the history because someone already did it for me. So someone by the name of David Britland actually already pretty much documented the entire history of this effect on his blog. I'll leave the link to that in the description or the comments down below. So as per usual, I'll just note down a couple of key points for history-wise for this effect. So the one that coined the name the trick that fooled Einstein is Jackpot Coins by Al Quran. So this was published in his lecture notes back in 1972, and as you can probably tell from the name, this effect was done with coins. And the effect itself was never really known as the trick that fooled Einstein, but it's a name that became associated with jackpot coins after Al Quran told in the lecture notes that, oh yeah, I showed this to Albert Einstein and it completely fooled him. But the principle behind the effect is actually much older than Al Quran's lecture notes. So the earliest reference that we can find for actually the effect is a novel card trick by Howard L. Grant, and this was published in the Magic World magazine back in 1920. So it is pretty old, but this handling was done with cards. So it is interesting that the earliest variation was actually done with cards rather than coins or any other objects out there. And I'll actually quote something from the Howard L. Grant publication because it is pretty interesting. While it is by no means new, it has never appeared in print. So we can probably conclude that it has existed before 1920, which is pretty interesting because, well, how much older does this principle really go to? Well, we don't know, but one thing's for sure, it existed way before 1920. And then since then, it has been used in numerous other effects using different objects as well. So Ken de Courcy actually did it with matches in At the Drop of a Match in 1971. Barry Richardson did with Scrabble letters. He published that in Pabular Volume 8, Number 2 back in 1983. And so this principle has been used far and wide with different objects, with different presentations to the effect, but generally the core principle has been used everywhere. Now, if you aren't interested in learning how this effect works and you're only interested in the history behind it, I've set up chapters throughout this video, so you can just fast forward past the explanation and continue on with more history. But since I'm a card magician, I'll go with the card version of this effect, which just so happens to be the first one published. Now it is hard to explain this effect, so you'll probably need to do it yourself to experience it, and then you'll gain more of an understanding. So you can just begin with any deck of cards, you can give it a shuffle or whatever that you want, right? You then ask the spectator to cut off a small packet of cards, preferably a small amount, okay? And it doesn't matter how many they cut off, you never have to know how many they cut off, okay? So even if they cut off like this amount, it doesn't really matter, right? I don't need to know the quantity, okay? Then I'm going to cut off my packet by myself. This packet has to be larger than this packet that the spectator cut off. Okay, so just to represent the spectator's packet, I'm just gonna place another card. So this packet that I cut off has to be larger than the packet that they cut off, okay? Preferably it should be about like 5 cards more than the packet that they cut off, okay? So it has to be a substantial amount, but you can just easily eyeball that, okay? So you don't have to do any precise like counting or whatever. You just have to eyeball the amount and you're like, okay, that's about like double the size, so we should be good. Next, you're going to ask the spectator to count out the amount of cards that they have. So in this case, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so they have 8 cards in their packet. And as they count out the packet, the amount of cards in their packet, you're also going to do the same. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, okay? So as they count theirs, you should count yours, because preferably the spectator shouldn't know that you're also counting this packet over here, all right? So preferably they shouldn't know, but if they catch you, it's not really that big of an issue, all right? But preferably, I think that the effect and multiple other people think that it's stronger if you don't like overtly show that you're counting it. So now that we have 16, so we have a number of 16, what we're going to do is that we're going to subtract 3 from this packet, from the number. So 16 minus 3 would be 13. 13, that's the number that we have to remember. 13 is going to be the final amount of cards that they're going to end up with, okay? And now that you have basically everything set up, you can just say this line. Quote, I have as many cards as you, 3 more, and enough to make whatever the final number is, which in this case is 13. So what you're basically saying is, oh yeah, I have as many cards as you, and I have 3 more, and then all the leftover cards that have more, that's going to make the final number of your packet 13, or whatever number that you have, okay? So that's what you're basically saying. So now, you and the spectator are going to count the packets at the exact same time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you say, oh yeah, I said I had 3 more, so you're going to take out the 3. So like, I had 3 more, and then you're going to count the rest. And then I said, oh yeah, the final number is going to be 13, correct? So then you said 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then you end up with the number that you said at the start, because yeah, math, right? So now it seems like, yeah, you just always knew the amount of cards that they cut through, because you can divine exactly how many you had and how many they had, right? Through that final number, or through that number they predicted at the start. So that's basically the effect and how it works. It basically self-working if you think about it. So it doesn't matter how many cards you or your spectator cut off, as long as you cut off more cards, it just always works, because math, there's like a whole like algebra related thing, but I'm not going to go into that. But you can do that with any amount of cards. So if I want to do it again, just to prove, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the spectator cuts off 5 cards, and then I cut off maybe a couple more, right? And I cut off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? And then 11 minus 3, that's 8. So so I know that they're going to end up with 8 cards, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 3 more cards, so you take out the 3 cards, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. So it just always works for some reason, yeah, because it's math. But yeah, that's basically the effect that fooled Albert Einstein, apparently, right? And now you can sort of understand why I said, oh, you have to do it yourself to sort of experience it. because definitely there's nothing mechanical about it. It's all math, so I can't really explain more about it. It just works, if you understand what I mean, okay? So that's the principle behind the effect that fooled Albert Einstein. So we've gone through the history behind the effect and how it generally works, but how did this effect get its name? Because obviously jackpot coins is very different from, well, the trick that fooled Albert Einstein in terms of name, right? Because jackpot coins is how Al-Quran actually named the effect. So, I mean, obviously this effect did apparently fool Albert Einstein, but there's a lot more context given to the story in Al-Quran's notes. The story goes, basically, when Al-Quran was performing at the Savoy, which is a high-class luxury hotel in the UK, the hotel's manager actually went up to him after his set on stage or around the tables. I'm not too sure. He just says after he finished his set. So the manager came up to him and asked, "Oh yeah, someone wanted to actually meet you at his table. Would you like to come with me to go meet him?" And then Al-Quran actually went with the manager, and it turned out that the person who asked him to come over was actually Albert Einstein. So once Al-Quran actually arrived at the table, Albert Einstein leaned over Al-Quran and asked, quote, "Where in the world did you get those extra coins? Did they come from your sleeve?" Unquote. This of course was in reference to jackpot coins, which Al-Quran had performed as part of his set at the Savoy. Al-Quran then performed the effect once more for Albert Einstein and then fooled him again. Al-Quran then said, quote, "It's not the numbers, it's the words that fooled you," unquote. And that was the story behind how this effect became known as the trick that fooled Albert Einstein. It's a very fascinating little story where Albert Einstein asked Al-Quran to come over, and then Al-Quran had fooled him once more. And yeah, that's generally how it works, right? A very simple story, and that's how this effect got the name, the trick that fooled Albert Einstein. But is this story actually is there any truth to this story? But is it actually true? Did Al-Quran actually fool Albert Einstein using just a simple math trick with coins? Well, in Al-Quran's lecture notes in 1972, he presented some background on the effect. Quote, "While playing at the Savoy, I finished my act, and the manager said someone asked me to join them at their table. It was Albert Einstein, the mathematical genius." Unquote. Now, during that era, Albert Einstein was already a celebrity, so him attending a very high-end hotel, the Savoy was a high-end hotel, wouldn't have been that odd. But then, the story sort of falls apart when you look at a couple more facts. So Albert Einstein, one of the main Albert Einstein visits to the Savoy was in 1930. There were newspapers published and footage filmed of the event. So you can just tell how monumental Albert Einstein was and just how his visits and lectures were. So he really was a pivotal figure, and just him visiting a hotel was already this huge thing. So that's pretty much the only account of him visiting the Savoy, which is concerning because Al-Quran was born in 1917. So that would have mean that he would have been 13 when Albert Einstein visited the Savoy. And that sounds pretty ridiculous. Now, to Al-Quran's credit, he got into magic fairly young. But is that enough to prove that Al-Quran performed for Albert Einstein at the Savoy? Not at all, because notice the choice of words when he was presenting the story. Quote, "While playing at the Savoy, I finished my act." Unquote. This meant that the Savoy hired Al-Quran to perform there. So he wasn't just some random kid there who wanted to perform for Albert Einstein. The high-end hotel actively hired him to be a performer at their hotel. So yeah, that's pretty concerning because Al-Quran really only started his performing career after World War II, which ended in 1945. But what if Albert Einstein visited the Savoy again after World War II? That could be possible, right? Well, Albert Einstein never really visited Europe again in general after World War II. He decided to, after a certain mustache man came into power in 1933, he decided to remain in the US and, to my knowledge, never returned to Europe. So Albert Einstein could not have gone back to the Savoy when Al-Quran was performing there. So with Alcoran starting his career after World War II and Albert Einstein never returning to Europe after 1933, it's safe to say that this story is nothing but just a fabrication. Okay, but why then? Why would anyone ever like fabricate a story with Albert Einstein and fooling him or whatnot? Well, it's just a good way to advertise yourself, right? If you say, oh yeah, I fooled one of the greatest minds in all of like history, right? In all of mankind, you'd be like, oh really? Yeah, can you show me something, right? People would instantly be invested because if they can figure it out, oh yeah, I'm smarter than one of the brightest minds in all of mankind, or I'm curious what could baffle like such an intelligent person, right? So it instantly becomes this hook. So it's just good PR in general. And again, Albert Einstein was a celebrity, and so that generates a whole bunch of stuff. Now, Albert Einstein passed away in 1955, and Alcoran published his lecture notes back in 1972, so nobody could really disprove the tale. So Alcoran could just use Albert Einstein's name to just like promote himself, and yeah, he not only did he have like the tale of fooling a celebrity, but he also had the tale of fooling one of the brightest minds in all of mankind. So yeah, it's just good PR for Alcoran himself. But why like make this story then? Why make the story of him fooling Albert Einstein of all people rather than just good PR? Well, I think there might be a little hint of irony in there, because have you guys ever heard of the myth that Albert Einstein was bad at math, right? Because in the when Alcoran was presenting the description of him, or the story of him fooling Albert Einstein, he said it was Albert Einstein, the mathematical genius. So I think that this whole tale has a little hint of irony, because by then there was already a popular myth, and that popular myth was, oh yeah, Albert Einstein was bad at math, which is just a myth that derived from a couple of like quotes taken out of context to create gossip, because again, he was a celebrity, and you know how people love to take things out of context and sensationalize stories regarding like celebrities and whatnot. So the quotes in question were from his teacher. So that was from Herman Minkowski. So Herman Minkowski said two quotes in particular that I think might have led to the creation of this myth. Quote, "The mathematical education of the young physicist was not very solid," unquote. So that was something that he said. And the second thing that he said was, quote, "For in his student days, Einstein had been a lazy dog. He never bothered about mathematics at all," unquote. And the reason why I say these quotes were taken out of context and sensationalized is that Albert Einstein never really failed math. He still got passing grades. He just prioritized physics so much that he never really bothered attending any other classes besides like physics, right? But he would always turn up for the exams and get a passing grade. So that's just a myth that's just like started and just passed around like wildfire, okay? So I imagine Alcoran was sort of riding off of that myth as sort of like Albert Einstein was bad at math, so this easy math principle would have absolutely fooled him type of deal. So that was probably the reason behind the story, just a tale riding off of a myth in an attempt to sensationalize a magic effect so that it can sell more and just sell better in general. And it just allowed Alcoran to just promote himself as the man who fooled Albert Einstein. So it was all just a PR move. Now, if you're interested in learning other variations of this effect or this plot, there are a lot of resources out there because it's practically self-working, so you can pretty much apply it to so many different things and can add different layers of deception to this effect. But what I just taught you was just the basic effect for this move, or the basic principle behind this effect. There you go. So Gagnon's Inner Sanctum by Tom Gagnon has a very nice variation of the plot. The Hermit Volume 1, Number 5 by Scott Baird, Card College Light by Roberto Giobbi, Card College Volume 4 by Roberto Giobbi, Pabulon Volume 8, Number 2, Magic of the Hand by Edward Victor, Scarney on Card Tricks by John Scarney, and yeah, those are just a couple of books that contain more reading for the trick that fooled Einstein. And that was the trick that fooled Einstein. Yeah, honestly, I found the story behind this effect to be far more interesting than the effect itself, because I mean, if you really think about it, the effect is just like a common math trick, and you're just saying, I knew the amount of cards that you cut to, or that you cut off, right? Versus the story is this intricate thing of, oh yeah, how many myths are involved in this story? How many, like, how true is it, right? There's a lot of uncovering, which I think make the story a lot more interesting than the effect itself, because the effect is, honestly, I think that the effect is kind of boring. It's a math effect. I mean, you could probably make it more interesting, but it's just not my type of effect, all right? But yeah, it just really makes you think about how many more stories exist in Magic, because just this one plot has this entire story to unravel with all this history. So it just really makes you think what other stories lie in Magic. And I've actually covered a couple of stories, including one where, well, cards are unfortunately involved in this very dark scheme, which I'll leave in the info cards there. It does get pretty dark, so I do want to give a warning for that. And then I give some later stories where I tell the story of a scam Magic book, and I also tell the story of the hyper card over here. So there's just a lot of stories in Magic that I think that people should investigate, and they'll find that Magic, like any other subject out there, has so many layers and stories, and that, you know, they're just waiting to be uncovered. And that's why I'm proud to be, you know, just talking about it, because it's just very interesting in general. And I hope that you share my enthusiasm for storytelling in Magic. But yeah, that's going to be it for me today. Stay healthy, stay safe, and see you guys next time.